Okay, so today we're going to talk about the SAT reading section, the long awaited. We should have done this on Friday, but we didn't. We should have done this on Monday, and we also didn't. So we're finally going to do it today. This presentation is a little bit long, so I will be checking my time, and if we're like close to an hour and we're not finished, I'm going to keep the other part for the next class. Because I don't know if you guys have seen this from the test, but it's a little harder to sort of break down the reading exam than it is the writing one, because writing is more about rules and about things that you can actually sort of state in concrete terms, like, oh, look at the subject verb agreement, or look at the sort of what part of speech it is. In this case, it's all about meaning and about looking at the context and interpretation. So it was actually pretty hard to come up with a guide sort of like the other one. So I did my best. Let's hope it's helpful. All right, so beginning, oh, and also I want your feedback in like the presentation style, because I think this is a little more interactive. If you guys like it, let me know. If not, then I can go back to the little black and white thing that I did before. Anyway, let's begin. The general features of the exam. So it's 65 minutes long and there's 52 questions, which makes it 1 minute and 15 seconds per question exactly. So as you can see, this is a little longer, or quite a bit longer actually, than the writing exam in terms of time, because writing gave you around half the time that you have here for each question. You have 75 seconds now, and you had 37.7 or something in writing, which is about exactly half. You have 5 written passages instead of 4. And you have the questions at the end of every passage, as opposed to in writing where you had them in the middle. So this changes the dynamics of the test a little bit. It gives you more time to go back and read the text, and it also makes it possible for you to read the whole text and then answer the questions and go back as needed. Okay, the problem-solving process. So this is basically the same for the writing. I'm just going to reiterate it so you guys kind of internalize it for both of these exams. You read the question, you identify the function of the underlined portion. So that's like, you won't always have an underlined portion in this case. You might have something in quotations, or you will have just something like in general about the text itself. I didn't really revise this part that much, so the underlined portion doesn't really apply to this test that much, to this section. Something incredibly important for the reading section is reading the surrounding context. So many of the questions are about like a general theme, general topic, main claim, things that you have to read the whole passage for. So always be reading a lot of the surrounding context. In writing, you don't read too much around the sort of underlined portion, but here you do. You eliminate choices to arrive at an answer, just the same as in the writing section. Anybody have any questions about either the key features or the problem-solving process? All right. Yeah, this is pretty much the same. Now, strategies. So you read the whole passage first. That's the first thing you do. I was thinking that maybe you could skim it. Skimming is like reading it quickly, sort of like just getting the general idea, but not the specific details. Going really quickly, like just really like I kind of trace it with my finger and read the lines really quick as my finger's tracing it. I sort of do it at this speed, which is really fast. And it might help you reading it quickly, and then when you read the question, you go back to the text. But it's really up to you. I didn't put skimming there because it might also be good to read the whole passage at your own pace and have a good idea, so that you already know what you're looking for when you read the questions and answer choices. So it's really up to you, whatever works best for you. What you do have to do is read the whole thing first, because otherwise you won't know which section the questions are about, because there is no underlined portion like the writing. So you read the whole thing first. Either skim it if that works for you, or read the whole text if that works for you. So you work on questions after reading, and you refer back to the text every time. Every time you feel like you need to look at the text, go back. You have more time to be able to do that. You need to learn sort of to know where your answer is sort of going to be located to not waste time in the whole text, but you will have to probably go back to the text almost every time. You need a lot of context for most of the questions, so just make sure you don't just read a little portion that you think the answer's in, because sometimes that small portion is informed by the rest of the text, by the tone of the text, by the main argument, by the plot, or whatever concerning the specific type of passage or question that it is. The process of elimination is still your best friend. That's the way we go around these answer choices. We sort of eliminate the ones that don't make sense, and then sort of look at the text more to be able to eliminate the choices that are closer to what we're looking for. Again, you can skip harder questions. However, keep in mind that the meaning of the text is best retained if you're looking at it right at that moment. So skipping a question to the next passage might be counterproductive because your brain's like focusing on the next passage already, and then you go back. So unless the question is really hard, then you can skip the passage because you don't really know if you're actually going to be able to answer it anyway. But still, if you skip a passage, make sure you sort of write down whatever sounds best at the moment, so that if you don't have time to go back, you at least have an answer. And you have 25% or 30% chance of actually getting it right. Use the answer choices to inform your rereading. This is what I was talking about when I said, don't read the whole text again unnecessarily. Use the choices that you have as answers, not only the question, look at the answers to know what you have to reread. Because reading the text over and over and over, the whole thing will just be a huge waste of time. So read the question and the possible answers to know what portion you have to read to sort of inform that answer. Does that make sense? Okay. And then this is something that's more of a trick than a strategy, but I would still encourage you to do it with every single question. Look at 2 questions at a time, because in this reading passage or reading passages, there's the providing evidence type of question where you have to go to lines 10 to 20, lines 12 to 15. And that's like a compound question. They ask you a question, you answer it, and then the next question is provide the correct evidence for this answer. So I'm going to get into that type of question later, the providing evidence type of question. But whenever you get that question, you should know that you can use those answers to answer the previous question. So always look at 2 questions at a time. So if I look at a question and it says, why does Analia's reaction to Liz is inappropriate? And I answer that question, and then the next question is provide the evidence, the best evidence for this answer. If you see that provide the evidence, you know it'll give you the lines of the possible evidence. So you can just go ahead and look at those lines and not the whole text to answer your previous question. So that's a key strategy that I would always have in mind to sort of save time and make your testing as efficient as possible. Does everybody understand this last point? Have you taken the practice exams? Okay, yeah, so you know how it works. This is a very good strategy. About any of the strategies, does anybody have any questions? Nope. Okay, let's go to tips now. Generate a global view of the text. Think about the elements of the text, okay? Think about plot, think about the main claim, think about descriptions, think about characters, all that stuff, and generate a sort of global view, sorry. Try to understand the text in general. Don't just look at specific points, generate sort of mental idea of what the text as a whole is. Try to develop a picture of the characters and the author. So often you will be asked questions about shifting perspectives, like what would the author say about this? What would this character answer to this argument? What would author 2 answer to author 1? So I encourage you to look at the characters or the people or the author and sort of develop a mental idea of who they are. What group are they a part of? What emotions do they have? How do they speak? What do they speak about? What's important to them? To be able to answer these questions that ask you to think like them. Does that make sense? Okay. Think about the tone and the stance if it is argumentative. Stance is a word that you might not know. Stance means postura, means like what I think about something. Do I see something in a positive light? Do I see something in a negative light? What is my argument about this thing? Like, am I in favor or am I against or whatever? And the tone is sort of the emotional language, the formality of the language. So basically, in which way is the author speaking or writing about this topic? So is it a mournful tone? Did someone die and they're like sad and grieving? Is it a descriptive tone? Is it just like naming facts and declarative sentences? Is it an angry tone? Is it a happy tone? Is it a quirky, fun tone? So you have to sort of know, or at least sort of have an idea of how the author feels when they're writing this and who they're writing to. And those things inform our understanding of the writing. Then, sort of the way we use parts of speech in the writing exam, we look at the parts of the writing. What function does each part serve? Why do they use certain words? Why do they write with formal language instead of informal? Why do they use declarative sentences instead of exclamatory? Why do they write about the past instead of present? Why does this character behave this way? That kind of thing. Because there's a lot of questions about how the author decides what to use, like what their strategy is in choosing a certain vocabulary and choosing a certain sentence or a certain paragraph. So you have to understand how they think. Why do they choose this thing and not that other thing? How would I write it if I were the writer? That kind of thing. Now let's move on to the general types of questions. These are the general types of questions that we can find in any type of passage. Then we have 5 different types of passages, and each of those passages or types of passages have specific questions to those types of passages. Before we move on to the types of questions, I do want to give you a disclaimer. A disclaimer means a sort of warning. All of this data, all of these types of questions that I wrote down are taken from one test. I didn't look at many tests and like grab the general types from all of them. This is just one test because it would have been too much to do like many. I looked at the 52 questions of one reading section and sort of broke it down into types of passages and types of questions. So if some questions don't really fit one single passage and they're more general, because you saw it in like test 3 or 4, I didn't look at that test, so I might be wrong. This is just my best effort at sort of creating a classification, but do take that with a grain of salt. Don't think like that's the last word on everything reading section. Like I'm not an expert for it by any means. Okay, with that out of the way, let's begin. First general type of question is vocabulary in context. So this is sort of like the writing in the fact that they show you one word and they ask you, what do they mean with this word? Or why did they choose this word? That kind of thing. However, it's not exactly the same because in writing, there was a lot of play with the parts of speech and like agreement and that kind of thing. here it will mostly be just about meaning, just about context. And so you read surrounding context and you have to choose a context appropriate meaning. It's not just about the parts of speech. It's, in general, you will find that all of them are grammatically correct, but they might not be the best choice based on meaning, connotation, or tone. So you look at, is the tone formal or informal? Is the language emotional or not emotional? And what the connotations of those different words are. Which word fits the topic best? Which word fits the argument best? That kind of thing. So do you guys see the difference between this vocabulary in the reading section and the vocabulary in the writing section? Yeah? Okay, good. Then you have the author strategy question. Here you're asked to sort of determine why the author chose one thing, why the author chooses this word, why the author chose to put this paragraph here. What function does this thing perform in the writing as a whole? So here are some tips that you can go through when you're looking at a question like this. Evaluating the function of the portion in question, that's the most straightforward way. Think about what comes before. So if I have a sentence about like, I don't know, the DNA's main characteristic is it's double helix. Look at the sentence before. What does it say? Does it set up an example for the DNA? Does it counter argument something? Does it serve as a conclusion? Is it a transition? So look at whatever comes before and whatever comes after to be able to determine what that function is of that thing we're looking at. Does that make sense? Okay. Think about previous claims or arguments. So here, it's not just about looking at the previous sentence or previous paragraph or the one after. It's about also thinking about the text as a whole. Think about what the arguments in the text are, what the plot is, what the main event is, what the characters are, that kind of thing in general. So you can also inform like what that thing is doing there. Why is that vocabulary used? Why is that sentence there? Because you'll find this kind of question in any kind of passage, in narrative passages, in argumentative passages, and descriptive passages. So yeah, you'll have different ways of sort of fitting this question into the context of the passage. Okay, then think about the tone of the writing and the audience. Think about who it is talking to. Is it a sort of argument for the abolition of slavery? Is it talking about women's rights? Is it describing an event in the scientific community? Is it talking to business people? That kind of thing. And think about the tone. Is it emotional? Is it descriptive? Is it funny? That kind of thing. In general, just the general tip for this kind of question, think about what you would do as a writer to think about why they did it. Does that make sense? Also, I want to reiterate that you always look at the answer choices to sort of know what your options are. Don't go for an option that you wouldn't find as an answer choice, okay? Does that make sense? Okay. This is one of the most general ones. Interpreting text. So the key here is that you're inferring or concluding something from the written text. You will never be asked, an interpreting text question is always asking about something that is written. It is always gonna require you to find something in the text. So this question is usually, or not usually, but a lot of the time paired up with the providing evidence question. You interpret the evidence or the text and you provide the evidence. So just keep that in mind when you're taking the exam. Read the question carefully. Think about your previous interpretation of the text. Remember what I told you about creating a mental understanding in general of the text, a global view. Keep that in mind when you're reading the question about interpreting text. What's your answer off the top of your head? What's the first answer that comes to mind? And then look at your choices. Do any of them fit the answer you had in mind? And then you can like eliminate one or two by process of elimination. And then look at the texts to better inform your answer choice. Then like you look at the text to make sure that your answer is the right one. Does that make sense? All of these strategies that I'm giving you sort of go from specific, from general to specific, so that you're able to save as much time as possible. Does anybody have any questions so far about any of the topics I've talked about?
I don't have a question, but here Kathy said that she's going to be joining a little late.
Okay, thank you for letting me know. Okay. Yep. Good. We're moving on then. Providing evidence. This is one of the most important kinds of questions. We'll probably find like 7 or 8 at least out of the 52. So that's a lot. It's like 20%. Is it 20%? Yeah, or more. No, a little less, like 15% of the whole exam will probably be this type of question. Between 4 choices, they'll give you the choices of the lines of text that provide evidence to your previous answer. So, since this type of question is always talking about the previous question, we look at this question as a pair. We look at this question and the previous one. That's why I told you to look at 2 questions at a time, because if you see this type of question, it means that before that, whatever question you have before this type of question, and you'll be able to tell what this is the type of question that you'll be most easily able to determine. And because you'll always have numbered lines in your choices. Does that make sense? So when you tell that this question is there, the previous question, you can use this question to solve the previous one, because you have 4 choices where you'll find your answer to the previous question. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. So where among the 4 choices do you find the strongest support to your previous answer? It won't always be easy to tell. Sometimes each of the 4 answer choices will support one of the 4 different arguments in the first question, but you can still use these lines to not have to read the whole text and focus only on those pieces of evidence. Anybody have any questions about this type of question?
I just want confirmation, because you said we can use this type of questions to answer the previous question, right?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to know.
Do you understand that?
Kind of like you can use, yeah. I mean, yes.
Look, I'm gonna illustrate it clearly. A providing evidence question will give you A, B, C, and D, and each of those choices will be a number of lines, like line 10 to 12, and it'll give you a word where it begins and word where it ends. And one of those 4 choices will provide the evidence for the answer of the previous question. And that's like for sure. If you have this question, one of those 4 choices will provide the evidence for your previous answer. So instead of looking at the whole text or thinking about where to look for your previous answer, just look at those 4 choices and see which one gives you a better answer for the previous question, because the previous question will always be something that you can find in the text. That's why you have evidence to support it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Actually, I got it now. Thank you.
Perfect. Let's move on. Shifting perspective. This one can be a little bit hard. We as humans have quite an inability of understanding how other people think because we cannot be them. But in this kind of question, you're asked to think as if you were someone else. You're asked to predict a reaction, a response, or a thought of a character, the author, or a person that is mentioned in the text. So you're asked a hypothetical reaction that a character will have to something. It'll ask you, how do you think author 2 will respond to author 1? how do you think Akira will respond to Jasmine? How do you think, or what do you think the social psychologists will think of this phenomenon that's described in the passage? So it'll mention one of the characters from the passage, and it'll ask you, what will they think about this part of the passage? So it will not be something that you can find in the text. It will be something that you will base on how you perceive the character. So it's hard. And my sort of process for this exercise, this type of exercise, is think about the characters, author, or people mentioned in the passage. Create a mental representation of who they are. So their emotions, their actions, their ideas, anything related to them that can inform this question or this answer. Confirm what the question or who the question is about, because the question will mention one specific character, one specific person. Make sure that you know which person you're supposed to think like, because it's easy to get lost in this sort of changing of perspective and to think as someone that they're not asking you to think like. So if they ask you to think about the social psychologists, think about when the social psychologists are mentioned. Only then. That mention of the social psychologist is the only thing that will matter to your representation of their character. Does that make sense? When I was doing this exam on my own, I almost got my character wrong. And when they were asking about one person, I thought they were asking about someone else because they were similar. Like they were asking about social psychologists, but I thought they were asking about anthropologists, which are social scientists. So just make sure that you keep in mind exactly what person they're asking about. You can highlight it or something if you're in the exam with your pencil or whatever, to make sure that you don't get that wrong. Because this is all about whose perspective are you supposed to think like. Based on your representation of them and further reaction or their thinking. Yeah, that's basically what you have to do. Does everybody understand how this type of question works?
Yeah. Teacher,
Yes.
I think this shift in perspective usually happens with history or science when they show you per passages, right?
Yeah.
Usually I see it there, and it's kind
Mhm.
of, I think it's harder when you have pair passages that are similar. Like they talked about one topic and they both developed their ideas, and one says this and the other says this, but both are not, like they agree on some stuff but disagree on the
Yeah.
other stuff.
Yeah, you're talking
That's
about
kind of hard.
sorry. You're talking about the double passage. The double passage is one of the types of passages that you will always have, and instead of being one passage, it's two passages in the same passage, right? Like it's two people talking about the same topic, as you say. And you're definitely going to see shifting perspective questions there. But about your point, Jeremias, those types of passages that you mentioned, that covers almost all of them. Like the 5 different types of passages are literature, social or natural sciences, historical, or the double passage that can be about one of those topics. So that's basically, I haven't seen a shifting perspective question in literature. That's the only one where I haven't seen one. But otherwise, you can find them in any other kind of passage. Yeah, so that's it for this one. So let's move on to specific passages now. The first passage we're going to talk about is the literature passage. I'm going to give you specific questions that you can ask yourself when you're reading this passage that will help you tackle the specific types of questions in it. So the questions you should ask yourself are, what is happening in the passage? What is the plot? What are the actions of the characters? What are the events that are happening? Because they might ask you about a certain moment, a certain event, or a description of the plot in general. What are the characters like? So who are the characters? How do they interact with each other? That kind of thing. Why does the author include this or that? So what function they perform. What is the tone of the writing? Is it lighthearted? Is it satirical? Is it serious? So yeah, all these things you can keep in mind in general to help you in the literature passage. And then there's specific question types that you will find in literature that you might not find anywhere else. The first one is identifying plot. Second one is description of the passage. And the third one is character analysis. So we begin with identifying plot. These are questions about the main events in the narrative. What I do is, as I read, I make a mental timeline of the events, sort of what is happening, when it's happening, and what comes after what, to sort of help me put things into different boxes of time, and separate them into different moments, because they might ask about any specific moment, right? Find a global way to describe the entire action. So a global way to describe the entire action might be a meaningful conversation between two people. Something very short, like a summary, but they will give you those choices if they ask the question. I'm just saying, keep in mind a sort of global view of the action in the text. What is more important? Because the choices will not be stupidly wrong. They will always be sort of right, but there will be one that is better. They won't make it easy for you, is what I'm saying. And you can also zero in on specific meaningful events. So, like when Ambar addresses the issue to Jeremias, what is the tone that she uses? Something like that. So you have to keep in mind like specific moments in the text and what the character was thinking, the emotions, that kind of thing. Does that make sense? Okay. Description of the passage. Description of the passage. It's kind of confusing how this is different to the plot. What I see as the key difference is that the plot is only about the action, is about the events specifically, whereas the description of the passage takes into account tone, takes into account characters, emotions. All of the elements of the writing are taken into account in a general description. The reason why I made this distinction is because there's actually, in this test that I'm going to show you, there's one question about the plot and one about the description, and I think it would be useful to you to know the difference between the two of them, between what the two of them are looking for, between a general description and a general plot. Does that make sense? Think about the key features: tone, language, plot line and argument, and characters and their relationship to one another. In broad terms, how would you summarize it concisely? So, whereas in my plot description, I would say a surprising request from one character to another. I describe the action. In a general description, I would just say a meaningful encounter. I'm not saying what the meaningful encounter was. I'm just saying there was an encounter and it was meaningful. So it's more general and it doesn't zero in on the action, whereas the plot does. Does that make sense? Okay. Character analysis. Questions about the thoughts, feelings, or actions of the characters. Ask yourself, who are the characters? Ambar, Jeremias, Catherine, and Camila. Those are the characters. Think about their physical and emotional characteristics. How do they interact with each other? So, does Ambar like Catherine? Does she hate her? Does Jeremias look up to Camila? Or does he look down upon her? What do they feel throughout the story? Is Camila sad and grieving, or is she having fun and happy? Which actions involve whom? Who punches whom? Does Jeremias punch Catherine, or does Ambar punch Catherine? That kind of thing. Because you will be asked questions about how does this person treat the other person? How does this person solve this problem with the other person, that kind of thing. Questions about their relationship to each other and about an action that concerns two people. So that's it for the literature passage. Does anybody have any questions about this passage? Nope, we're good. How do you guys, yeah.
I want to
Jaime.
ask you a question.
Yeah.
Do you think, in order to give them an idea of a literature passage, would it help to, after reading the whole entire passage, do you think would it help to read the first sentence of the first paragraph and the last sentence of the last paragraph and kind of have a, let's say, I don't know if main idea is the correct word, but at least to have a glimpse of, okay, this is the big picture of the entire passage in literature. I'm just asking. Because usually that's how they tell you in to read ACT passages.
Yeah, and that sounds like a possible strategy, and I would not say that it's wrong. However, I will tell you something about that kind of reasoning. Reading the first line and the last line of a literature passage might not serve in the way you're thinking. And I will actually show you this because the literature passage that we're going to look at today, the one that I actually already talked about before, but we're going to go over it again, the one about the Japanese tradition, I think, of asking a hand for marriage or something. That is a perfect example of why it doesn't work always. Narrative passages sometimes have an introduction that doesn't really give away the whole meaning. It's maybe just a setup or a hook, but it's not the main topic or the main plot event is not revealed. Maybe the first paragraph, but that's already more, right? That takes more time. So I personally would not recommend it, but also would not discourage it. For me, I'm neutral towards it. But if it works for you, then go ahead and do it. Okay. Yeah. So how do you guys? What do you guys think about this passage? Is it easy or hard for you? Is it one of the harder ones?
For me, it's one of the harder one because I don't usually read books.
Okay.
I think it also depends on the level of difficulty that they are giving you, because I think it goes from 1 up to 4. So I think it also
For me,
depends.
it's pretty easy.
Yeah. Well, it also depends on what your strength is, right? Some people are better at science. Some people are better at like literary writing. But this passage in general tends to be harder for most people than the others because it's less literal. It relies more on satire, on mental images, on abstract representations of things and emotional representations of things. So in general, keep in mind those things, that most things are not to be taken literally here. You should be able to tell what the emotions are, what the tone is, that kind of thing is important here to help you be a little better in interpreting it correctly. And also, they know this. In the SAT, they know this. So a lot of the questions will give you a wrong answer that is based on a literal interpretation. So just keep that in mind when you're approaching a literary passage. Okay, now let's move on to the science, which includes social and natural science passages. The questions you should ask yourself: what is the subject matter, the topic, and what is the purpose of the technical detail they go towards? So if they're talking about, the evolution of dinosaurs, why do they talk about bird feathers? What purpose does that small technical detail serve in the larger argument or the larger discussion of this subject? Because they use a lot of technical detail that you should understand in context. Like, there are a lot of things that are very precise and technical about, like, maybe a specific study or maybe a testing like mechanism, or maybe a specific detail or a specific function that you have to sort of put into the context of the whole writing a lot. So these two go together. Number 1 and 2 go together. specific question types, I found two, inferring implications and graph info analysis. Inferring implications deals with information that is not in the text, conclusions that you should be able to draw from stuff that is there, but that is not, it's sort of a leap in reasoning is what I mean. They won't tell you it, and it will not be paraphrasing. Like, they will give you something, and from that information, you have to say, because this is true, this other thing will be true as well. So they're saying, I don't know, let me think of an example. If they're talking about dinosaurs and they talk about a specific function for one dinosaur, maybe because that is true, you can assume that all dinosaurs have that same function, that kind of thing. It won't be like the other questions where you have to draw a conclusion from the text. This one will be more like a logical step in reasoning. Like, if this is true, then this other thing will also be true. But they will give you answer choices to sort of help your reasoning. And you can look at those answer choices to be able to tell, is this a logical step in reasoning from that thing that they mention in the text? Does that make sense, sort of? Okay. Yeah. So some conclusion based on, but not present in the text, basically. I already outlined these steps before. Okay, so any questions about this? Nope. Okay, let's move on. Graph info analysis. You will find graph info analysis both in social science and natural science, which is why I sort of included them into the same category, because both of the science passages are descriptive, which means they're dealing with a topic in sort of declarative sentences, not really argumentative. They're not really expressing an opinion. They're more stating facts. And they're also not narrating a story. So there will be graphs, probably in every one. And the graph information is related to the text, and those relationships will be interrogated. So they will ask about those relationships. Look at the graph information and read the question and think about which conclusions follow from the graph information. So sometimes you will have to support a conclusion from the text with the graph, and sometimes you will have to support a conclusion from the graph with the text. But in general, you will be asked to sort of explain those relationships between the graph and the text. Does that make sense? Okay. Does anybody have any questions about this?
I had a question about the literature passage, but you already got to another section. I don't know if it's appropriate for me to ask now.
Just write it down and we'll talk about that when we're done with the sections. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, so nobody has any questions about this. Anybody have any questions about the science passages in general? Nope. Okay. So let's move on to historical argumentative passage. Okay, so the historical passage is in general argumentative. As I said, it might be about slavery, it might be about the Constitution, it might be about women's rights. So in general, it is about some sort of debate that was had previously in history. So in general, they will be historical and argumentative. There will be something somewhere in history, but there will be an argument made in these passages. So the questions you should ask yourself: who is the author and what group are they a part of? What group do they represent? So you have a sort of little explanation above the passage that tells you who wrote it and when they wrote it. That's important for this kind of passage especially, because they talk about who the author is. You can tell if they're a man or a woman, and you can tell where in history the piece belongs to. So is it in the 1800s? So if it's in the 1800s, the US independence was like around 1770 or something. So you'll be able to know that it might be a part of that conversation. If it's like in the 20th century, it might be about women's rights, or that kind of thing. So, and think about the author. Who is the author and what group are they a part of? You can see what group they are a part of depending on how they talk. It might be a Black Democratic leader, or it might also be like a president talking about slavery. So they might talk about the same topic, but they might have different roles in that discussion depending on who they are and what group they represent. Does that make sense? Cool. Then ask yourself, what are they arguing? What is their point? What is the topic and what are they saying about it? What is their stance? Are they in favor, against? Do they regard it emotionally, neutrally? In general, these will be more serious and formal, but you can still sense some emotion from it. Like, is it more neutral and declarative, or is it more emotional, impassioned? Is it angry or sad or hopeful? That kind of thing. And then once you've asked yourself those questions, based on those characteristics that you're able to infer of the text, how does the author strengthen their argument with writing strategies? Because there will be questions about what purpose does this paragraph fulfill in the argument? Why do they use this kind of word? Why do they talk about these questions? What are those important? Why are those important in light of the entire argument? Specific question types. So think about the purpose of the passage. That's one of the questions. And the central claim of the passage. In arguments, and this is a lesson from these types of passages you can take away for your own personal essays. Your personal essays are some sort of argumentative. Even though the main focus might not be an argument to why you should be accepted, it is understood that they're part of a wider conversation, which is your application, that is saying, I am worthy of you accepting me. So they are some sort of argumentative. And there's a difference between the central claim and the purpose of the passage. The central claim is what we'll go to first. Central claim means main argument, main point. So what is the main argument of the author? This entails topic and tone. Topic, tone, and stance, actually. So think about the topic. Is it women's rights? Is it slavery? Is it the Constitution? Think about the tone. Is it declarative? Is it emotional? That kind of thing. And is the approach positive or negative or neutral? Does central claim make sense? Okay. And then the purpose of the passage. Purpose of the passage goes beyond the topic or claim. It is asking what role this piece performs in a wider conversation. So the central claim can be understood from the passage itself. What is my stance on women's rights? Topic, women's rights. Stance, positive, like I want women to have rights. And tone, angry. I'm angry because I cannot believe that they haven't been given rights yet. That's your central claim, those three things. But beyond the topic or claim, what role does this piece perform in a wider conversation? So within the big conversation, the debate about women's rights, what makes this piece specifically special? Does it stress the issue as an urgent issue? Does it try to act as a neutral description of the two sides? Does it sort of try to look at a specific demographic of this wider conversation? So the purpose of the passage goes beyond what it is about. Does that kind of make sense? It's difficult to understand, but there is a difference. Okay, I'm glad it makes sense. Again, tone and stance are important here, and the conversation they're a part of. But you look sort of more at a wider scale, right? Main claim is sort of like looking at the main topic, and purpose is putting that specific writing in with all of the other writings about the same thing and thinking, how does this compare? Does that make sense? Cool. Any questions about the historical argumentative passage?
No, I just wanted to comment that there was a very hard one in the practice test number 7 that was about women's right. So we were talking about it with Catherine the other day. We both did it, and I would really like one day, maybe in another class, to analyze that specific pair of passages because they were especially difficult.
Okay. I have a question for you guys. After this class, I was planning on doing this sort of same setup with tips, strategies, and blah, 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 blah about the SAT writing essay. But would you like to, before that, go ahead and take one entire class period and do reading and writing for one practice test all together, like complete? Maybe that practice 7 that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Why not?
Definitely.
Okay. I think in general, at least most of you want to do that. And I think it would be pretty useful to first sort of use these skills in writing and reading, because really that's the main part. The essay, they will have other essays to think about. And you can also choose not to do the essay. Not all colleges require it. So we can first apply these concepts a second time in a sort of full writing and reading section, and then go to the essay. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Good. All right, so let's move on to the last type of passage, the double argumentative passage. So this passage, as I said, is the one where you have two people, passage 1, passage 2, and they talk about the same issue, and in general, it's argumentative. So the questions you should ask yourself: who are the authors and what group do they represent? Again, what conversations are their arguments a part of? They both will be a part of the same conversation. So that's why, like, they will be a part of the same conversation so that you can compare them, sort of. How do the authors strengthen their argument with writing strategies? And how would you describe each of the authors' person? Like, what would they say to each other in a real conversation? Because you will have questions about their relationship to each other, and like hypothetical shifting perspective questions about like, how would this author respond to this one, and that kind of thing. So without further ado, let's move on to the types of questions that are specific to the double passage. Okay, so author claim. This is basically the same as the central claim. I just really called it another thing because it's two passages instead of one. So there's really two central claims that you have to compare. But the author claim question is the same as the central claim question. What is the author arguing for? What is the topic and the tone? Is the approach positive or negative? Their stance. Pretty straightforward and the same as the other one. So if you understood the other one, this should be the same. Just keep in mind that when they ask about the central claim or the author claim, they're asking about only one of the passages, because each of those passages have a different central claim, even though they have the same topic. Does that make sense? Cool. Purpose of paragraph. This is one I should have deleted. I'm sorry. This one should not be here. I thought I deleted it. The purpose of paragraph is actually part of the author strategy type of question, where they ask you what function does this paragraph, or what purpose does this paragraph fulfill within the entire text. So it's basically asking you, why did the author choose to write this paragraph? So it's the same as the author strategy, where they might ask you, like, why did they choose this vocabulary? Why did they ask this question? Or why did they write this sentence? It's the sort of same kind of thing, and I should have deleted it from there. So just to make that clear. And the second type of question that is specific to the double passage is the relationship between texts. So this is specific to this one, and it's asking, what topic in common do the two texts have? What roles are they playing in this wider conversation? So if they're talking about, I don't know, maybe they're talking about the adoption of a new currency. Is one of them in favor? Is one of them against it? Is one of them sort of trying to consider risks? Is the other one looking at opportunities? Those are the kinds of questions that you might get about the relationship between the two passages. And then you have how they respond to each other. So actually, this is just something that you should think about when you're thinking about their relationship to each other. You would also have questions about shifting perspective a lot in these passages, where they're going to ask you, how would this author respond to this particular section of the other author's passage, or what would this author think of this claim made by author 2, that kind of thing. I think that's it for content of today. Does any of you have questions about the double passages specifically?
Nope.
Nope. Okay. So
No, me. Sorry, teacher. Sorry. Me.
yeah.
I just wanted to know, like, if there's like an easy way to know the hypothetical response that they will be giving, like, because every time that question appears, there's like a lot of text and you have to spend a lot of time in it. So
Yes.
I don't know.
And they're also kind of confusing.
Mucho texto.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what I do and what I sort of stated before, don't only look at the characters and try to determine, like, in literary passages and think like, oh, how does this character feel? How does this character react to this? Think of the author as a character to be able to answer these hypothetical questions. Think about what their tone is, how they're approaching the topic, what their stance is, what their focus point is, and based on that, sort of build an image in your mind of how do these two authors approach the same topic. And based on that, you can sort of look at how this author would approach this specific claim. I will also talk about specific examples of this type of question when we look at the reading exam right now after we're done with the topic. So you'll be able to see how we do that more practically in those exercises. Catherine, you had a question, and then we'll move on to the actual test.
Yes, it was about the literature passage.
Yes.
I wanted to know, I don't know if it's like personal, but I feel like it's kind of hard to separate the main idea from the details when it's a literature passage, because there's like so much content. So what do you think is a good strategy to separate that? Because sometimes like more than one answer can be technically correct,
Yes.
but at the same time, like there's one that fits the best. And how do we identify that?
Well, you should first ask yourself, is this question looking for specific detail or general global view? So if it's looking for a global view, you will in general prefer an answer that is more general, even though there might be specific details that might be correct in the answer choices. If there's an answer that can sort of put all those details inside it and still be correct, then that would be your general answer. If it's asking for specific detail, it's the opposite. You look at the answers, and if there's one general answer that's correct, and there's one specific answer that can fit into the general answer and still correct, then the specific one will be correct. There's not an easy way to sort of explain the process to you right now, but we will look at the literature passage again and sort of see how that's done. What I will say, however, is that I will go through it quickly, but I have already made a video of me analyzing that passage in the previous class where I talked about, well, I don't know what I talked about in the class, but I did use 30 minutes to look at that first passage about the Japanese tradition and stuff like that. And there are questions about the plot and the description that will definitely help you understand that process. So I encourage you to look at that again.
Okay, well, thank you.
All right. let's move on to the actual test. Let's see if we can finish the whole thing. We have 55 minutes. So I'll try to go quickly, but in detail. Oh, sorry. I did not made the same mistake again. I always do that. Instead of like changing the screen, I just go to the tab and then it doesn't show up in your screen. Now it shows up, right? Okay, cool. Okay, so I will read this quickly. Excuse me, I'm just pouring myself a little bit of water. I think you guys should remember this from what I read before, so I'm just going to go ahead and read the questions for this one and go and find the relevant part for the answer. Which choice best describes what happens in the passage? So this is what you were asking about, Catherine. Answer A, one character argues with another character who intrudes on her home. One character receives a surprising request from another character. One character reminisces about choices she has made over the years. One character criticizes another character for pursuing an unexpected course of action. So, this one's about like the whole thing. If you remember this, the passage was about Akira asking Chie for Naomi's hand. Naomi was Chie's daughter. So, yeah, the whole passage was sort of focused on him making this request to her in an unconventional way. He didn't follow tradition because he didn't have time. He had to go to America to take a job as a dentist for the Japanese community. And so he approaches Chie with urgency. He doesn't follow protocol and he asks her for her daughter's hand anyway, because he has to decide, is he gonna go, is he gonna stay? So yeah, the whole passage is sort of this conversation and Chie's reaction and Akira's thoughts about it. So that I would say that is the main event or the plot. So that's another words, what happens. What happens is sort of refers to plot or main event. So let's look at the choices. One character argues with another character who intrudes on her home. This one's a little confrontational. It's saying that there's an argument, a heated argument, and that someone intrudes in someone's home. And that's never really the case. He's very respectful. Even though he doesn't follow protocol, he knocks on the door and waits and refers to Chie with respect. So there really is no argument and no intrusion. So that's not the tone, right? You look at the tone and that's not the way it's written. So that's wrong. One character receives a surprising request from another character. But this one certainly fits this unexpected. So Chie really did not expect this to happen at all because there was no protocol followed. She had no idea this was going to happen. So it's definitely surprising. And he is asking for her daughter's hand. So it is surprising. It's a surprising request from one character to another. One character reminisces about choices she has made over the years. There's several ways to discard this choice. Chie is not really reminiscing about anything. If anything, there's Akira, which is the guy, reminiscing about the way he made the choice and could he have asked it in a better way and that kind of thing. But it still is not the main event. It's not what happens in the passage. It's just like one short paragraph. So it would be too specific. And it's also wrong in terms of pronouns. And then one character criticizes another character for pursuing an unexpected course of action. This one might be the most confusing one because there certainly is an unexpected course of action in the case of Akira, who didn't follow protocol and who didn't follow tradition and asked the request sort of directly and that kind of thing. But the key part here is criticizes. Chie, at most, judges his request with amusement, or if she ever criticizes Akira's request, she does it in her mind, but she never actually criticizes it. And it is certainly not the main focus of the passage. So the most general and the choice that we can apply to the entire length of the passage is B. Does that make sense? Catherine, do you sort of understand how we went through the choices here?
Yeah, just like pick the one that you see is most prominent in the whole thing.
Yeah. It's like there's a lot of things happening and you have one net to sort of try and catch them all together in one sort of, and on one sort of try, on one try, yeah. And like in that one try, grab as much as you can. And don't grab anything that's wrong and try to not leave anything out. And this is the only choice that manages to grab everything and not leave anything out that is important. Okay, so let's go to number 2. Which choice best describes the developmental pattern of the passage? This is a description choice. And the first one was plot, second one was description. A careful analysis of a traditional practice. So this one, I initially got confused with this one because we do mention tradition and form and custom at least once or twice in the text, and we know that that is an important part of it. But the key thing is that the text is not written as an analysis of a traditional practice. A traditional practice is sort of the setting, if you could say, the general setting of the story. But it doesn't really describe the passage as a whole. It's sort of, if I had to say, you know, this conversation between two women happens in the context of the conversation about women's rights. The conversation between two women would be the description, and the context or the setting would be that conversation about women's rights. Detailed depiction of a meaningful encounter. It is definitely detailed. There's a lot of detail about the rain and about the way someone was standing and the emotional appreciation, and it is a meaningful encounter. A definitive response to a series of questions. There is really no interrogation here. It's one question and there is no definitive response. So it's wrong in many ways. And a cheerful recounting of an amusing anecdote. So there's certainly a moment where Chie is amused, but that is before she knows that he's asking for her daughter's hand. As soon as that is revealed, Chie is no longer having fun. She's like, oh my God, what the hell is happening here? She's definitely not cheerful, and it's not amusing as a whole. There's a certain moment where Chie demonstrates amusement, but otherwise that's wrong. So B would be the right choice. Number 3, as used in line 1 and 65, directly most nearly means, let's look at that. Akira came directly, breaking all tradition, and I asked directly because the use of a go-between takes much time. Okay, so frankly, confidently, without mediation, and with precision. So confidently is the one that we can most clearly discard here, because he really isn't very confident in his approach, because he didn't follow tradition. He's like doubting himself. We can see at the beginning, he's asking, if I had asked it another way, had I followed form, would Chie have been more receptive? He's doubting himself. He's not really confident. He does speak from the heart. He does speak frankly. And with precision, I mean, I wouldn't say he doesn't speak with precision, but it's really not applicable to a narrative. This is more talking about like descriptive style writing. And it's really not what directly is meaning here. The word directly here means without following tradition, without using a go-between being an intermediary or mediation. So really what directly means here is without mediation. Does that make sense? Cool. Which reaction does Akira most fear from Chie? This is a character question. Remember character analysis questions? So think about your idea of Akira and your idea of Chie. Where did you remember fear? And clearly remember that Akira is the one fearing Chie's reaction, right? Not Chie fearing Akira's reaction, because that's where you get confused. Who is fearing whom? Akira, the guy who's proposing, fears the mother's reaction. Remember? So she will consider his proposal inappropriate. We know that his proposal was unexpected. We know that he didn't follow protocol, and we know that at some point. Oh, look at that! Remember what I told you? Look at the second question. Yeah. So let's do that here so you can sort of know how it works yourselves. We look at this question and we see that there's lines with evidence. So we know that in one of those 4 choices, we will find our answer. So we have to sort of pair up our understanding of the text with this evidence. So I think the right answer here will be this one, because that's what I know is true. He is fearing that she will consider his proposal inappropriate. Let's see, line 33. His voice was soft, refined. I don't think that really answers anything that's asked in the question. It doesn't talk about fear at all. So A is wrong. 49 to 51. You know how children speak so earnestly, so hurriedly, so endearingly about things that have no importance in an adult's mind. So yeah, this is Chie thinking. This is Chie in her mind thinking about Akira. And she is thinking about him as immature, which would make us believe that this might be the right answer. It's confusing. However, we have to keep in mind that we're looking for for Akira's fear, not Chie's. Here it is Chie that is thinking that Akira is immature, but Akira never thinks about that. At least we don't get that information in the text. So that's why this choice will be wrong and this evidence will be wrong, because we know that this evidence supports this choice. Lines 63 and 64. Please don't judge my candidacy by the unseemliness of this proposal. Please don't think that I'm unfit to take your daughter's hand because I didn't use the protocol to ask for her hand. That's what this is saying. I'm paraphrasing it. And that supports this evidence or this answer, because Akira fears, he's telling her, please don't think this is inappropriate because of the way I'm doing things. So it's a very tight fit between A and C for 4 and 5. And then she will underestimate the sincerity of his emotions. That is one that we can discard immediately because he is very frank. He is very honest and earnest. He addresses the fact that he knows it's inappropriate or that he knows it's unexpected and that he didn't follow protocol. He doesn't leave any detail out. So I don't think he's afraid of her underestimating his sincerity. So, what? 72, 70, 71, 72. If eager to make his point, he'd been looking her full in the face. This is the evidence for answer D, because he's like looking her full in the face to make sure that she knows he's honest. But we know that he's making an effort to be sincere with his emotions, but we never see he's actually afraid of it. He's just being sincere naturally. We don't know if he's afraid of not being sincere or if he's just like that normally, but we don't see that in the text. So the correct answer here will be A, and using C as evidence. Does that make sense? Cool. 6. In the passage, Akira addresses Chie with affection but not genuine love, objectivity but not complete impartiality, amusement but not mocking disparagement, respect but not utter deference. So here they're talking about what sort of, in what way, what is the tone that Akira uses when addressing Chie? And they're saying something, but not something. Okay, affection, but not love. So he's affectionate, but not that much. He's objective, but not completely impartial. He's amused, so he's having fun, but not making fun of her. Or he is respectful, but he's not like bowing down to her. So, okay, affection, maybe. There's a little bit of emotion there, but do remember that this is Japanese culture. I think it's Japanese culture. And here, emotions are not really encouraged. You're encouraged to follow protocol and tradition and show respect. So he's not really showing that much emotion, much less love, but he's not really being affectionate. They're strangers, right? He doesn't know her. It's the first time that Chie sees this guy. So he's definitely not being really closely, he's not really using informal language with her at all. He's treating it as a formal matter. There's protocol, there's tradition, that kind of thing. So A is wrong. Objectivity, but not complete impartiality. This doesn't apply to the text. This is definitely wrong because we're not talking about a descriptive passage. This is a character who's making a request and he's clearly interested in getting a yes answer instead of a no answer, right? So he's definitely not objective, much less impartial. So B is wrong. Now, here we have to keep in mind who addresses who. Because we could argue that Chie does address Akira with amusement, albeit not with mocking disparagement, but Akira is super serious. Akira I don't think he's even thinking about smiling at any point. He's like, this is the most important request of his life. His entire future depends on it. So he's definitely not amused. I mean, he's not having fun at all. So yeah, the best answer is respect, but not utter deference. And here, this answer is correct because he is respectful towards Chie, but being deferential means being like bowing down almost to someone, like recognizing that they're definitely more important than you and like doing this. But he's not doing that because he broke protocol. He broke tradition. Like he's being respectful as much as he can, but he's definitely not ticking all the marks of respect that are necessary. Does that make sense? I can already see that we're not going to be able to finish this passage, but that's okay because I want you to have a detailed explanation for each answer. Main purpose of the first paragraph is this is author strategy type question. Describe a culture, criticize a tradition, question a suggestion, or analyze a reaction. Let's look at the first paragraph. Akira came directly, breaking all tradition. Was that it? Had he followed form, had he asked his mother to speak to his father to approach a go-between, would Chie have been more receptive? This is so tangled up. I'm sure some of you might not understand what it's actually saying. But what we mean here is Akira broke all protocol with his request. And he's thinking to himself, was that it? Is that my only chance? Had I followed the protocol, had I asked my mother to speak to his father to approach a go-between, if I had done all these protocol things, would the mother have been more receptive? Would she have taken me more seriously? So what he's doing here is he's analyzing the reaction that Chie had to his request because she might have shown that she was a little bit amused, that she was like sort of having fun. And that was definitely not what he was going for. He did it very seriously. He wanted her to really, really consider it. And even though we talk about tradition and we talk about culture, there's definitely, that's not the main focus. And we might get lost in the game of pronouns between Akira, mother, father, and we might think that somebody suggested something to him, but that never happened. It's all in his head. He's asking himself, if I had done this, if I had done that, if I had gone to my mother, if I had gone to my father, would I be able to, would I have been more successful? That's what it's saying. So there's never any suggestion there. It's all in his head. So it's analyzing Chie's reaction. Does that make sense? Good. As used in line 2, form most nearly means, let's go to line 2. Was that it? Had he followed form? Had he asked his mother, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so had he followed protocol, had he followed custom, tradition, let's look at it. Appearance, custom, structure, or nature. And all of these are valid choices. They all describe sort of the proper way for something to look or for something to be done, right? So none of these is like immediately wrong. So we look at connotation. In this case, form is referring to tradition or custom, the protocol that should be followed for these types of things in Japanese culture. So it's not physical appearance, and it's not nature, the nature of something. It's not like an emotional nature or a mental nature or literal nature anyway. And even though the closest one is structure. However, structure and custom are both refer to structure, really. It's only that custom is more specific and goes toward a cultural tradition. That is a custom. So custom is the structure of a cultural tradition, sort of, if that makes sense. So in this case, because custom is more specific and appropriate for that specific context, we use letter B. Does that make sense to all of you? Okay. Why does Akira say his meeting with Chie is a matter of urgency? So here they talk about line 32. We know that this question is not my thinking, it's interpreting the text. That's how we can tell between a question where it's asking us to come up with our own answer, or it's asking us to look at the text and see what they're saying about it. So even though we have our own opinion about why he says this, we need to look at the text to be able to really arrive at the answer. Does that make sense? Okay. He fears that his own parents will disapprove of Naomi. He worries that Naomi will reject him and marry someone else. He has been offered an attractive job in another country, and he knows that Chie is unaware of his feelings for Naomi. So we can, from what we read, we can eliminate what's definitely wrong, right? So these things, I mean, I could already tell you what the answer is without looking at line 32, because I've looked at the text like several times at this point. He does know that this is true. And this is true. So these two are definitely valid choices without looking at the text. However, he fears that Naomi's parents will disapprove of him, not the other way around. We never talk about Akira's parents or their reaction to this proposal. And disapproval of Naomi is never expressed. So A is wrong. And he worries that Naomi will reject him and marry someone else. We don't really know that. I mean, his real worry is not that, because we never really see him express this worry. So we can look at line 32 and make sure. 32, does it actually say 32? Okay, a matter of urgency, line 32, and we have to look at the context, sort of. Okay, matter of urgency. Oh, no, I remember. There's like evidence one after that. Yep. Sorry. Okay, line 39. That's the evidence type, so we'll just look at that. I don't want to trouble you. I think that's the one for line 39. Oh, this is, sorry. 3942, we have, so I don't want to trouble you. Do you really think that this is an answer to anything that's asked? Like, this really tells us nothing about what he fears or why he thinks this is urgent. This is 39 to 42. Normally, I would approach you more properly, but I've received a word of opposition, blah, 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 Japanese community. So this is telling you, normally I would do this a proper way, but I couldn't. So maybe that's why it's urgent, right? Because I have to go to America. Then we have 58 to 59. Depending on your response, I may stay in Japan. So this, I mean, yeah, I guess it sort of applies, maybe. I don't think it's really as good as the other one, but It does mention that depending on this response, he may stay in Japan, but it doesn't really address why it's urgent. So let's just leave it at that. And then line 72, 73. So we have, I think this is the one. Oh, or just, I see I startled you. Just this. So this doesn't really tell us anything about why it's urgent. So we don't really see any mention of this in those lines that we analyzed, but we did see mention of this. So this is the right answer. He's been offered an attractive job in another country, and the correct evidence would be 39 to 32 because it actually addresses that. It says, I wasn't able to do this the right way, the proper way, because I don't have time. I have to take this position or reject it, but I have to do it now. That's why it's urgent. So that's the first passage. I'm gonna go to the bathroom for a sec, and you guys can discuss something among yourselves, whatever, I don't know, whatever.
Saben, ayer me quité los frenillos.
Genial. Qué lindo, me encanta. Dale ya foto, poneme por todos lados.
Me encanta, me encanta. ¿Qué sale cuando aprieto esto? Miren un poco. No sale nada.
No.
No,
Es una tacita de café que dice recreo. Yo quiero probar. En serio, entro nomás tipo en donde están los participantes y donde se levanta la manita y eso. Hay una tacita que dice necesitar un recreo. Ese lo quiero poner, pero no, mejor no. Me da vuelta. Pero bueno. ¿Encontraron?
Ahí está, ya puse.
sí, sí.
Ahora puedo ponerle todos. Por favor.
XD. A ver,
Pongan todito.
Mira,
Pongan
¿dónde se fue él?
Al baño.
Ah.
Pongan todito, pongan todito. Vamos a ver qué dice. Tendré por aquí la generar los clavos.
Cambiaron de texto ya.
¡Ay, juez!
All right, I'm back. Okay, so I do want to mention something to you guys before I move on. For next class, we're going to do that. We're going to do practice test 7, writing and reading together completely. But I do want to make it interactive. Here I'm mostly talking because I don't have enough time to go through as much with you talking as I can with just me reading and sort of telling you why I chose this answer. But next time I want to do it interactive. So your homework will be redoing those, because most of you probably have done them already. Redoing those 2 sections, having all of your answers, because I will call on any of you to answer the question, and you will tell me your answer and explain how you got to it. So it'll be okay if you don't exactly know how to explain it, because we'll do it together, but it will not be okay if you don't have the answer. It's okay if it's wrong, that's fine, but do have an answer. I will get mad if you don't have one. Okay? For Friday. Cool. Moving on. Every day, millions of shoppers hit the stores in full force, both online and on food, searching frantically for the perfect gift. Last year, Americans spent over $30 billion at retail stores in the month of December alone. Aside from purchasing holiday gifts, most people regularly buy presents for other occasions throughout the year, including weddings, birthdays, anniversaries, graduations, and baby showers. The frequent experience of gift giving can engender ambivalent feelings in gift givers. Many relish the opportunity to buy presents because gift giving offers a powerful means to build stronger bonds with one's closest peers. At the same time, many dread the thought of buying gifts. They worry that their purchases will disappoint rather than delight the intended recipients. Anthropologists describe gift giving as a positive social process, serving various political, religious, and psychological functions. Economists, however, offer a less favorable view. According to Waldfogel, 1993, gift giving represents an objective waste of resources. People buy gifts that recipients would not choose to buy on their own, or at least not spend as much money to purchase, a phenomenon referred to as the debt weight loss of Christmas. To wit, givers are likely to spend $100 to purchase a gift that receivers would spend only $80 to buy themselves. This debt weight loss suggests that gift givers are not very good at predicting what gifts others will appreciate. That in itself is not surprising to social psychologists. Research has found that people often struggle to take account of others' perspectives. Their insights are subject to egocentrism, social projection, and multiple attribution errors. What is surprising is that gift givers have considerable experience acting as both gift givers and gift recipients, but nevertheless tend to overspend each time they set out to purchase a meaningful gift. In the present research, we propose a unique psychological explanation for this overspending problem, i.e., that gift givers equate how much they spend with how much recipients will appreciate the gift. The more expensive the gift, the stronger a gift recipient's feelings of appreciation. Although a link between gift price and feelings of appreciation might seem intuitive to gift givers, such an assumption may be unfounded. Indeed, we propose that gift recipients will be less inclined to base their feelings of appreciation on the magnitude of a gift than givers assume. Why do gift givers assume that gift price is closely linked to gift recipients' feelings of appreciation? Perhaps givers believe that bigger, i.e. more expensive, gifts convey stronger signals of thoughtfulness and consideration. According to Kammerer, 1988, and others, gift giving represents a symbolic ritual whereby gift givers attempt to signal their positive attitudes towards the intended recipient and their willingness to invest resources in a future relationship. In this sense, gift givers may be motivated to spend more money on a gift in order to send a stronger signal to their intended recipient. As for gift recipients, they may not construe smaller and larger gifts as representing smaller and larger signals of thoughtfulness and consideration. The notion of gift givers and gift recipients being unable to account for the other party's perspective seems puzzling because people slip in and out of these roles every day, and in some cases multiple times in the course of the same day. Yet, despite the extensive experience that people have as both givers and receivers, they often struggle to transfer information gained from one role as a giver and apply to the other, complementary role as a receiver. In theoretical terms, people fail to utilize information about their own preferences and experiences in order to produce more efficient outcomes in their exchange relations. In practical terms, people spend hundreds of dollars each year on gifts, but somehow never learn to calibrate their gift expenditures according to personal insight. Okay, there's a graph there that we will look at after as needed. The authors most likely use the examples in lines 1 to 9 in the passage every 2 showers to highlight the examples are, let's see, 2 to 9, right? The weddings, and birthday, anniversaries, graduations, and baby showers. Yeah. That kind of thing. So we highlight this is about author strategy. What do they use these examples for? Highlight the regularity with which people shop for gifts, recent increase in the amount of money spent on gifts, anxiety gift shopping causes for customers, and number of special occasions involving gift giving. Yeah, so this one's definitely wrong because there is no mention of anxiety to that point. It's all about sort of describing something. Then recent increase, we never talk about recent increase because these are sort of holidays that we have every year where we give gifts. So either this or that. And which one fits better into the argument of the entire passage? The entire passage is about the act of gift giving and its social role, and analyzing how effective it is in fulfilling that social role or social function. So this would be the most appropriate sort of argument they're highlighting with those examples. They're highlighting how regularly people shop for gifts. They're not focusing on the special occasions, they're focusing on how often people have to go and shop for gifts, because they're setting up an argument about the importance of gift giving, right? Because if you're going to talk about a topic, you first have to establish why it's important. And they're saying it is important because people shop, like they shop in Christmas, shop in Easter, shop in Thanksgiving, shop in whatever, right? There's a lot of moments where people shop for gifts. Everybody understand that? Cool. In line 10, the word ambivalent most nearly means, line 10. Okay. This frequent experience of gift giving can engender ambivalent feelings in gift givers. And they're saying many relish the opportunity, but many dread the thought of buying gifts. So they're saying they're both eager about buying gifts and they like doing that, but at the same time, they are apprehensive, they're anxious about it because they're afraid that people won't like them. So yes, they're apprehensive, but they're also eager. Yes, they're supportive, I guess. They're eager, but they're also apprehensive. It's never unrealistic, but they are conflicted because at the same time, it's positive and negative feelings. And that's really what the word ambivalent means. So that's the right choice. Does anybody have any questions about that? Nope. Cool. The authors indicate that people value gift giving because they feel it functions as a form of self-expression. We never talk about self-expression. It's more of a social role. So it's not a role about the self, it's more a role within the context of a relationship. Is an inexpensive way to show appreciation. I wouldn't really call it inexpensive. I mean, there's really more inexpensive ways to show appreciation: a hug, a kiss, a text message. So I wouldn't really say a gift is one of those. And they definitely talk about how much it costs too. Requires the gift recipient to reciprocate? Not really. I mean, I'm sure some people like that if I give a gift to you, then you have to give a gift to me. But I mean, if we're talking about efficiency, I might just as well buy a gift for myself, right? So it doesn't really make too much sense for this to be the general reason behind gift giving. This is the reason why. Because people believe that gift giving strengthens a relationship. If you give someone a gift, you show them your regard, your appreciation, and you create this bond because they believe you care, right? And yes, you show appreciation, but it's not inexpensive at all. So that's why that one is wrong. So D is the right answer. Okay? I want to clarify that I am doing this without looking at the next question because I want to go quickly, which is still not happening. But yeah, that's why I'm not doing it. You guys should do it in the test, but I'm not going to do it now because it just like sort of takes time to be looking at two questions at the same time. So best justification for this answer, lines 10 to 13. Okay, that's pretty much what we're saying with the answer. Relishing the opportunity because it's a means to building a stronger bond with someone. So that's pretty good. 22 to 23. Let's see. People buy gifts that recipients would not choose on their own. This has nothing to do with what we're talking about, with the value of gift giving. This has really nothing to do with that. 31, 32, research perspectives. People often struggle to take into account other people's perspectives. That's sort of the same thing as the previous lines that we analyzed. It really says nothing about the true value of gift giving. And although unfounded. Although a link, blah, 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 might seem intuitive, such an assumption may be unfounded. So this is really, again, not talking about the value of gift giving. These are all sort of refutations towards the perceived value of gift giving. The three previous sort of line options that we had were more like counter arguments than they were supporting arguments or evidence. So it's definitely A. Okay. 15, the social psychologists mentioned in paragraph 2 would likely describe the debt weight loss phenomenon as, well, the answer is predictable. And this is about character perspective. Think about where the social psychologists are mentioned. We mentioned anthropologists, we mentioned economists, and then we mention social psychologists in one little sentence. Okay? This is social psychologists, right? Because social psychologists are the one that do research into this. So they are saying that this egocentrism, social projection, results in an inability to account for people's perspectives. So this debt weight loss phenomenon that's saying people are not good at predicting gifts that others will appreciate would be predictable for us psychologists because they already know that. They already know that people have an inability to know what others are thinking and how others are thinking. So it would be predictable to them. And the key here is knowing who we're talking about, because economists might think another thing. Anthropologists might be surprised, might think it's unprecedented or questionable. So social psychologists specifically will think this about the debt weight loss phenomenon. Okay? All right. The passage indicates that the assumption made by gift givers in line 41 to 44 may be, so assumption made in line 41 to 44. Gift givers equate how much they spend with how much recipients will appreciate. So what they're saying is, the more I spend, the more it will be appreciated. That's the assumption. Does the passage indicate that is correct or incorrect? Unreasonable or substantiated? And the answer is incorrect. It's not insincere because no one's lying. It's really what they believe. It's not unreasonable because it's based on the knowledge that we have of ourselves and what we believe others do, and that is not unreasonable. It's just uninformed, maybe. And it's not substantiated because substantiated means there's evidence to support it, and the evidence does not support it. So it's incorrect. 17. Which choice? Okay, 53 to 55, perhaps consideration. So this isn't really giving evidence to the answer. It's just reiterating the assumption. This is basically saying the same, like gift givers believe this, and we already knew that. So it's not really giving us evidence for our answer. According to relationship, according to blah, 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 gift giving represents a symbolic ritual where people signal their willingness to invest resources in a future relationship. So this is not really contradicting the assumption, which we know is the right answer. This is supporting it. So it's not the right answer. It's not the right evidence for our answer. Asked consideration, 63 to 65. So as for gift recipients, they might not think the same thing. They don't think that more expensive gifts mean more appreciation. So this is a contradiction to that assumption. So for now, that's the best choice. And then 75 to 78 in relations. In theoretical terms, people fail to utilize information about their own preferences, blah, 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 to produce more efficient outcomes in their exchange relations. Okay, so this is also not wrong. It's actually contradicting the assumption. But let's look at this. The passage indicates that the assumption blah, blah, blah may be insincere. Where do they actually say that it might not be true? Here, they are supporting the fact that it might not be true, but they already said it. Here is the first time where they're introducing that contradiction. They're saying, however, this might not be the way we think. This might not be true. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so number 18, as it is used in line 54, convey most nearly means 54. Gifts convey stronger signals of thoughtfulness and consideration. So when you convey a signal, you communicate a signal. Counteract is definitely not the right choice. Transport refers more to a physical transport. And conveying thoughtfulness and consideration, those are abstract concepts. So we're not really transporting the concept. And exchange, we're not really exchanging anything. We're just communicating them, putting them out there. So D is the right choice, okay? Okay. Authors refer to the work by Kammerer and others, line 56, in order to, let's look at this. According to Kammerer and others, gift giving represents a symbolic ritual whereby gift givers attempt to signal their positive attitudes while relationship. And what we had before, why do gift givers assume that gift prices closely, blah, 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 blah. So what I think is they're using this study to explain why people think that more expensive means more appreciated. That's what I think that sort of shout out is doing there. And let's see what it says. Offer an explanation, introduce an argument, question a motive, or support a conclusion. So question a motive, for sure it's not the right answer because it's not questioning anything. It's actually supporting what we're asking or what we're saying before. It doesn't introduce an argument because it's explaining it. And these two seem to be the most correct. However, a question was just raised before. It wasn't a conclusion. So it's really offering an explanation to that question, not supporting a conclusion that has already been drawn. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. The graph following the passage offers evidence that gift givers base their predictions of how much a gift will be appreciated on, and really we could already answer this without the graph, but let's just look at it. Our graph, our axes are role and mean appreciation. So we're saying measuring appreciation based on more expensive and less expensive by gift givers and recipients, okay? So the appreciation level of gift recipients, yeah, but that means that they're actually thinking, what would the gift recipient think, like, okay, so let's interpret the graph together. If this were the case, it would mean that they would accurately predict what gift recipients would think. And that would manifest in the graph by these columns, this and this being exactly the same or similar. Because if the givers really were able to know how the recipients would appreciate the gift, they would not have such a difference in their own perception, right? Does that make sense? Which is why the first one is wrong. The monetary value of the gift. So we do know that they're thinking more expensive means more appreciated, less expensive means less appreciated. So this is right. Their own desires for the gifts they purchase, no. They're not really taking their own desire into account. I mean, some people might, but in general, they're thinking cost. And the relationship with the gift recipients we don't really see any mention of that. I mean, even though we do see that they want to strengthen the relationship, they're not basing the appreciation on the strength of the relationship already, right? It's the other way around. It's depending on how much they appreciate, they will strengthen the relationship more. That's it. So this one is the right answer. And then the authors would likely attribute the differences in gift giver and recipient mean appreciation as represented in the graph to an inability to shift perspective. That works for me. Increasingly materialistic culture. I mean, we're never really discussing how materialistic gift giving is, even though it is, obviously, we know that, or most of us at least. It is very materialistic. That's not what we're talking about here. So remember, this is not about your opinion. Because if it were about your opinion, every person would have a different right answer. So it's not. It never is. So always look at the text, right? Or the graph. No, B is right. B is wrong. A growing opposition to gift giving, that's never really stated in the text, so it's wrong. And a misunderstanding of intentions. There is a misunderstanding, but it's not really a misunderstanding of intentions. In any case, it's like a misunderstanding of perspective or appreciation. So it's an inability to shift perspective. That's the right answer. And that is it for passage number 2. And it's 3:26. So I might just go over this and give you the answers. And you guys can maybe ask me via email if something is not clear to you. I'm going to read them to you, okay? I'm going to read them quickly. Write them down. I mean, you do have those, but I'm going to read them anyway. 22, B, and 23 is D. 24 is D. 25 is C. 26 is B. 27 is B. 28 is C. 29 is A. 30 is A. 31 is D, and that's it for the science passage, the natural science passage. Then 32 to 41 is the historical passage. 32 is B. 33 is A. 34 is C. 35 is B. 36 is D. 37 is C. 38 is C. 39 is B. 40 is C. 41 is B. That's the historical passage. And then lastly, we have the double passage. And the answers are 42 is B. 43 is A. 44 is A. 45 is D. 46 is C. 47 is B. 48 is A. 49 is D. 50 is B. 51 is D. And 52 is A. I have explanations for all of these answers because I did myself before having this class. So, because I was planning to do the whole thing. Obviously that wasn't possible. But if you have any questions about these answers, if you are not sure why it's right, just ask me via email and I can give you a detailed explanation, no problem. Okay? Cool. Was the class good? What do you think about it? Yeah? How clear was the content about this test compared to the writing one? Do you think it was clear enough?
I think it was. I think
it
you
was.
were really concise with what you wanted to get across.
Okay. That's all I can hope for, really. This reading one was a real challenge. It wasn't easy at all for me to come up with like general types of questions. But if you have any questions about it, I'm sure you might have more questions about this one than you had about writing. So don't be afraid to shoot me an email. And if I don't answer your email, which is possible, don't be afraid to shoot me another email saying like, what's going on? Please answer my email. So yeah, that's about it.
Teacher, can I ask you
I
first?
have a question.
Okay, Leah first.
Can I ask for your PowerPoints? Because I have my notes and I made it.
Yeah, tell me which ones have I not sent yet.
You just send the first and the second one, I think.
I didn't send any
No,
others.
you directly send the videos, which is
Just the videos and the
Okay.
PowerPoints for 1 and 2.
Okay. Yeah, I will send them. I will send the PowerPoints.
And I'm glad that you're home and safe.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. And someone else had another question.
Yes, I had a question about the homework. I wanted you to please say it again because I couldn't hear properly.
Yeah, absolutely. So since next or this Friday, we're gonna be going through the reading and writing sections of practice test number 7. Your homework is to do that, to do the reading and writing sections and get your answers, because in class I'm gonna be asking you for the answers because it's gonna be interactive this time. I'm gonna be asking you for the answers and an explanation of them. So make sure you do them so you're not left without anything to say. I don't care if it's wrong, but I do care that you have tried. Okay?
Which practice test
Okay.
does it have to be?
7. Just to make it clear, Gerardo or Catherine, you were the ones that did this test and we're talking about it. So is it the one that's listed on the College Board, the official one?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Cool. Okay, so I will look at that one and solve it all myself before the class, and I expect you all to do the same so we can have a cool, productive discussion. Okay? Okay, class time is up, and it was a pleasure to see you all again, and you can expect good internet from now on. No more missing classes. All right.
Great, thanks.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
all.
everything, teacher.
Teacher.
Happy Friday.
Thank you for
Do you have a question before we go?
Oh, yeah.
This homework is like for this Friday or next Friday?
No, this Friday.
This Friday, okay.
This Friday. Yeah, I know it's a little long, but yeah, because otherwise I will have to like read it all over again and sort of explain from zero to you what I've done. And I'm going to do the same thing. Like I'm going to do the work in the test and sort of answer the questions myself. I won't just leave it up to you. But I do expect you to have your own answers because I don't want to spend the class lecturing you on the test. I want you to participate. So I'm going to be asking each of you at random to answer the questions. So you need to have an answer for each of the questions and at least some sort of reasoning behind it so that you're not left without anything to say, because that would be kind of embarrassing. So yeah, it is for this Friday.